Welcome back. In this module, we're going to talk about Chapter 6, which is preparing fire service personnel for fire prevention duties. This is a very good book, and it's very detailed in the finer nuances. And this is one of them that's pretty interesting. Now you got fire prevention personnel or the firefighters, basically. Now the whole fire thing is going from that to fire prevention. They're keeping the fire extinguishing, of course, firefighting for fire suppression, and they're trying to move into, and they've already gone into EMTs and personnel safety, and now they really want to go into fire prevention because they're better to not have a fire at all than have to put one out, right? So anyhow, I'm here in the desert. I don't know if that's Devil's Tower back there or not. It kind of looks like it. When I was in the Air Force in Montana, one of my roommates was Gary, and he lived in Moorcroft, Wyoming, which is in northern Wyoming. We went down to his house a couple times, and because he had a pretty cute sister. And anyhow, the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which took place on Devil's Tower. And in that movie, I don't know if it was a train or a bus or something, I forget, a long time ago, pulls into a town, and at the bottom of the screen that says Moorcroft, Wyoming. And who'd have thunk this little town of Moorcroft, Wyoming, when we were there, and I was in the 1960s, there were more horses on the streets than there were cars. And there were dirt streets and more poor people riding horses. And it will be on a big television production like that. Though Moorcroft's claim to fame is from it, you can see Devil's Tower. It was pretty neat to be able to see Devil's Tower all the time. So anyhow, let's get going on this thing here, and we'll get started. One of these days, I don't know why that side of this thing stays on until you start. If I close it later, it closes the whole thing. But anyhow, here we go. Chapter 6, preparing fire service personnel for fire prevention duties. Remember that up to this time, the emphasis has been on, let's say up to this time, but mostly emphasis on fire service that's been on putting out fires. But now, so we're going to overview here. We're going to explain the lack of emphasis on fire prevention in the United States, list the 4 reasonably expected components of a fire protection master plan, explain the benefits of fire prevention training for all fire service personnel, discuss the importance of pre-fire planning, describe the importance of having properly trained fire inspectors, identify the educational needs of fire inspectors, summarize the relationship between the fire service and the National Professional Qualifications System, identify pertinent professional standards applied to fire inspectors, and list a component of a comprehensive review of a community's fire problem. So the lack of emphasis on fire protection. Again, they were concentrating on firefighting. And then firefighters and EMT were called because they're needed. So most of the time when you saw one of those people, it's because you called them and you needed them. Now, fire preventionists, not quite as glamorous, and sometimes they're a little bit confrontational with the public, not necessarily come to your house, but the public in businesses and stuff, because they might come around and tell you, you have to do this or have to do that, and maybe even spend money and stuff. So now it's a whole different kind of deal with the public. Rather than people calling you when they need you, now you're going to go there so they don't have to call you, but the public doesn't get that. They get that that now you're here to tell them that you got to have fire doors, you got to have no smoking, that type of thing. So it's a whole different little angle on being in the fire department. Fire prevention training for all fire service personnel. So we'll have pre-fire planning services, what they are. On-site visits to buildings and occupancies for the purpose of gathering and documenting information that will ultimately be used in pre-fire plans and building information files. What's a pre-fire plan? Yeah. That's a pre-fire plan. Is a plan you do before a fire starts. Fire safety program enhances the image of the fire department, and fires decline when fire safety efforts are stepped up. So there's been some statistics showing that, and that's what they want to do. Fire Protection Master Plan is a comprehensive analysis and descriptive report about a community's fire problem, which includes subsequent preparation, and implementation of a plan that addresses the fire protection needs of a jurisdiction with an economic analysis of the costs associated with the recommendations. Some things are considered are fire prevention, code enforcement, zoning, fire safety education, fixed fire prevention in structures. And we're talking about fixed fire prevention structures. What's the main thing there? Sprinkler systems, and many other fire protection related areas. The master plan is kind of like a roadmap. Now the CRR, the community risk reduction, which we talked way back in chapter 2, and the 5 E's will be used to follow that roadmap. The 5 E's being education, engineering, enforcement, economic incentives, and emergency response. Recruit training program for fire prevention. Talk about they'll have to train in inspections, fire causes and hazards, inspection techniques and procedure. How do you do an inspection? How should you act during an inspection? Pre-fire planning, fire cause determination, and fire protection systems. These are all part of the recruit training program. They're going to train nowadays. They're training almost all recruits in fire prevention as well as fire fighting. Pre-fire planning is basically for complex structures or target hazards. Sprinkler control valves, look at standpipes or risers, other information on fixed fire prevention equipment, and hazards that may endanger firefighters too. Fire prevention training assignments, assign personnel moving up through the ranks to serve in Fire Protection Bureau. In other words, the people that are going to get promoted, they have to serve a time through the fire prevention part of the fire department. Use all active fire service personnel for fire prevention duties. And that's a good idea. Rotate them through to be doing inspections and things. And Harry S. Truman had a great quote, "A fire prevented is better than one extinguished." Need to know the significance of what's being inspected, not just fire extinguishers and smoking. The following instructions on the next 6 slides were given to fire inspectors in the Philadelphia Fire Department in 1913. And are still applicable pretty much today. We're talking about each one of them. This is really good information. Now, remember, these are people that were signed on or we're going to be firefighters. They're going to be fire suppression or firefighters. And now they're talking, well, they're going to make some of them, or maybe all of them, even fire inspectors. Whole different ballgame. So, and there was some kickback or pushback on this at the time because firefighters was kind of a more glamorous thing, and they when they were done, they could say, "Look what we did," and all this stuff. And again, they were called when they were needed. And they showed up, and they were heroes. Now they're going to be fire inspectors, and they're going to go in and do inspect your facility and tell you what you have to do. They're not going to be the heroes anymore. So they had to. This is what the fire department in Philadelphia in 1913 gave these instructions to them. Now remember, this is over 100 years ago. The work of fire prevention may impress you as a fad or a joke at the outstart, but your matured view will be that it is both interesting and serious. and in comparison with fire extinguishing, it stands as a bureau of police to the detective bureau. Your sound judgment of corrections to remove fire dangers still has the backing of your superior officers against all protests and to secure the desired result. You are to permit no hindrance in your work through fear or favor, friends or enemies. In other words, your sound judgment of corrections to remove fire dangers. Remember, they still has the backing of your superior officers. So everybody behind you in this effort here. But then don't let through fear or favor or friends or enemies get in your way. Be courteous, explain in detail your mission, and do not quarrel with the occupants of any building. Remember, there is distinct advantage over the man who has lost his temper to the man in an argument with self-control. Now, that's good advice all the time. There's a distinct advantage over the man who has lost his temper to the man in an argument with self-control. You are representing the dignity of a department of your city and must in no case initiate a quarrel. In other words, what he's saying is don't argue with somebody, reason with them, of course, but don't argue with them. If you cannot get out, this is number 3, continue. If you cannot report the facts to the officers in charge of the fire prevention work and have them open this avenue for you. In other words, sometimes people are just unreasonable. And if that's the case, instead of arguing with them, just go back to your bosses and get their help and straighten it out. Make friends with the engineer, janitor, superintendent, or any other person in charge of the building. These men have considerable information on the property condition and influence in having promptly corrected conditions that you desire improved. Again, that makes a lot of good sense too. You get to know these people and they can help you out. They know what you're going to do and they know why you're doing it. And they know that you're there to help them prevent fires. They can help you. This new responsibility calls for intelligence, sound judgment, broad views, and being amenable to reason. Narrow-mindedness and bombast have absolutely no place in this work, and every new and practical idea bearing on the end ultimately to be achieved should be promptly grasped and utilized. This is a pretty heavy paragraph here. This new responsibility calls for intelligence, sound judgment, broad views, and being amenable to reason. Narrow-mindedness and bombast have absolutely no place in this work. And get this one, every new and practical idea bearing on the end ultimately to be achieved should be promptly grasped and utilized. In other words, pretty much says any ideas that are good ideas, no matter where they come from, you got to take them. And that's true today. I mean, number 6, gently and firmly decline the friendly cigar or other small article usually offered in good faith, but occasionally used by occupants or owners of property to put the inspector in a bad light. In particular, guard against the least suspicion or suggestion of graft in this form. By adhering to strictly business dealings, you are in a stronger position should your work be questioned and viewed. So what they're saying there is don't accept favors, be professional, and they're trying to put you in a bad light and maybe dissuade you from doing your duties. Don't let that happen. So those 6 things were pretty good advice in 1913, and they're pretty good advice today too. So training in fire prevention inspection, the education includes inspection procedures, of course, fire and safety codes. Got to know them fire and safety codes if you're going to do this. Plan reviews, building code fire protection provisions. Remember, there's building codes and there's fire codes. They're 2 different things, but building codes usually have some of this fire codes in them. Health codes relating to fire safety, and court decisions affecting the field too. National Professional Qualifications Board, or National Board of Fire Service Professional Qualifications, Fire Board Service Professionals Qualifications, an organization commonly referred to as the Pro Board, okay, professional, of course, established to oversee a means of acknowledging firefighter and other related fields of achievement, primarily through the accreditation of organizations that certify members of public fire departments. In a lot of places, there are boards such as that. Colleges are certified, accredited against the name they use, as they use it in here too, by and I forget what there are different regional boards, and Carl Albert's certified, accredited by them also. So this is a common practice throughout a whole lot of different. If you go to industries, you're going to get your hair cut from a barber or a beautician. Yeah, they've been certified by a board also. So this is not an uncommon thing, but I don't think it's ever happened. Wasn't happened before this for fire service people. NFPA has 3 different well, you don't know what you call them, acts or laws or whatever. They're not laws, but they're standards. There you go. NFPA 1031, Professional Qualifications for Fire Inspector, a standard that identifies professional performance qualifications for fire inspectors and plant examiners. NFPA 1033, Standard for Professional Qualifications for Fire Investigator, a standard that identifies professional performance qualification for fire investigators. And NFPA 1035, I guess they don't like even numbers, 1031, 33, and 35. But anyhow, Professional Qualifications for Public Fire and Life Safety Educator, a standard that identifies professional performance qualifications for public fire and life safety educators, public information officers, and juvenile fire setting interventionists. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Juvenile fire setting interventionists. I don't think that they mean that the people that are getting qualified are juvenile fire setting interventionists. I think that's part of the training. This is how do you handle them. I think a lot of fires, arson fires, are from juveniles. The 3 NFPA standards do not require a separate position for each job. They may be combined as needed. In other words, one person can do all 3, or if it's a big company, you have one person doing for each one, and they may be required for courtroom qualification. Frequently in lawsuits or trials, they call expert witnesses, and when they do that, they have to establish the bona fides of the witness, and it's not just because they've been doing this for a long time. There's more to it than that usually. So to be a expert witness, you usually have to have some kind of certification or training on it. There may be state programs also. Oops, where am I? Okay, I messed up here. Okay, there's there you go. Oh, there you go. State programs also, but the state programs may have their own needs and wants, but they usually refer to those NFPA standards anyhow, or use them. 4-year fire protection and safety engineering program at Oklahoma State University, looked upon as a leader in academic fire protection programs. And there are 24 such programs. And that program at Oklahoma State started in 1937. So you can see they were pretty ahead of their time. That's it for this one. That's the overview, mind you. So remember, this is a very good book, and it's really interesting. It's not as dry a reading as a lot of textbooks are. So read it and understand it too. It's pretty easy to understand. There's a lot in it, and you'll learn a lot about fire prevention. And that's it for this particular module. We'll see you next time.